Hello, guys, and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. And today we are talking about the state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's an article that came out from Variety last week. And, obviously, this is a topic on our minds too. What's going on with superheroes? We haven't talked about in a while. If you guys are just joining the podcast before we were after we were Legends of Tomorrow podcast, but for a great number of years, we talked about the Legends of Tomorrow television show. So it's kind of interesting to kind of go back and talk about superheroes in general. So we're kind of in the different spheres of Marvel, me and Amy. So Amy, where are you at with your watching of Marvel?
It's wild because I feel thoroughly disconnected from the Marvel universe right now, which in and of itself should be an indicator that something's wrong. I used to be on it I was at every premiere. I would watch Shield religiously, and then there just got to be too much that I couldn't keep up with.
Yeah.
And I'll be really honest, I chose to put my kind of cinematic universe world into Star Trek. Star
Mhm.
Trek has been putting out so much good content. Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks have been super, super solid. And so I chose to sort of grasp onto that. I'm like, there's only so many franchises I can actively hold on to. And Marvel disappeared for me after Avengers Endgame, which I thought was a great, no pun intended, end
Like most
game.
people did.
Like most people did, it felt so thoroughly wrapped up that I was like, okay, I can check that off and I'll come back to it if and when someone says some things are great. And this is the
Only
problem.
WandaVision, I feel like, was the only thing people were
It,
like, wow, that's
that's
great. You should watch it.
I did now that I remember it, I did see Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness for three reasons. One, it had multiverse in its name. I was going to be there. Um Scarlet Witch and Tom Holland, and I guess Benedict Cumberbatch. But that one, that felt like the last vestige of the connection to the old pre-Endgame world that existed. Everything else to me was just too much. By the time I was like, oh, um let's get into Falcon or let's get into Loki, it was just too much to follow. And then all of the movie cinematic options just keep getting not great reviews. And
Right.
I'm at the point where I've got a lot going on. I'm poor. I'm only gonna go and see things if I can afford it, and it's really that good. And I gotta tell you, I haven't been to a movie in a very long time. I certainly haven't been to a Marvel movie since Doctor Strange. So it's one of those things where I'm super disconnected. So this Variety article that came out really surprised me in a lot of ways that I just was not caught up with. So those of you, if you've not read the article yet, we're not going to read the article word for word. We're going to
No.
pick and choose some things that we like, but it is the article that came out on Variety. I'm actually trying to find the date. It was about 5 days ago
Yeah, it
that came out.
wasn't
It's The
wasn't too
Crisis at
long ago.
Marvel by
Mhm.
Tatiana Siegel. So if anyone's interested, you could read the whole article. We'll post it in the description. It's a really well done article. God, I love good journalism. Journalism's
Yeah.
great. But it really breaks down the fact that things are just not going great. And we're like, wow, things don't seem to be going great. And the article's like, no, really, it's not. It's not going great at
Because you
all.
get some of more of the behind the scenes stuff too. Because like you obviously get the upfront of like, yeah, these movies aren't doing so well. Disney's not doing so well in general, and we know that that's a big thing from the parks to the the animation and all that. And we'll see how Wish ends up doing later this month. But a lot of people are just Disney plus waiting a lot of things as well, and not actually going to movies. I am
Mm.
fully caught up with Marvel from the movie standpoint, but not the shows, which is kind of shocking because I used to be caught up on literally everything. I
Yep.
started with WandaVision. I loved WandaVision. We're all like, yeah, this is gonna be great. And then as the other shows went on, like I was never a big Captain America fan, so I was like, oh, I could skip that one. And then I was like, oh, I'm really just really excited for Miss Marvel, and that started well. And then somehow, and Miss Marvel's like one of my favorite characters, Kamala, and I somehow just in between it got too much, and I was like, oh, I'll catch up later. I never did. And then She-Hulk, I was like, oh, I'm excited for that because I really like that character. But then everyone said the CGI sucked, and then I saw
Mm-hmm.
clips and I was like, oh, this is not my type of humor. I don't think I'm going to watch it. And then really, I've only caught up with the movies, but mostly out of I have AMC stubs. I go see a lot of movies. I don't know if I would see every movie if I didn't because nothing has really surprised me. I liked Shang-Chi, which was Shang-Chi, which was years ago at this point, in like 2020.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's any other Marvel movies I've enjoyed since. Spider-Man, that's it, because I'm a big Spider-Man fan. So, and not the
Yes.
Sony one, but the the one with all
But
three of them.
is that even can
Yeah,
oh.
the one
That
that's
was Multiverse of Madness, the one I was talking about.
no, Multiverse of Madness is the Doctor Strange movie, the No Way Home with Tom Holland and
Yes.
Tobey
No, that was
Maguire. Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Okay, I did enjoy that one. But that's I had to think about that for a hot second. Rachel, who's in the chat, is so. By the way, if you guys are watching us on YouTube, if you are joining us on online listening on your streaming platforms, you can see a video of this podcast. And in the video, you'll see a little blur pop up from the people who are joining us live. If you are a patron, you get to join us live at the legendary listener level, which is super fun because then people like Rachel can comment and say, haven't watched Hawkman, most of Moon Knight, 2 episodes of Miss Marvel, or Loki season 2, which is great because I didn't even remember we had a Hawkeye.
Yeah,
Totes forgot about that one.
Hawkeye was solid. I watched that like during a Christmas break where like my family was like just wanted to watch something. I was like, "Oh, Hawkeye's out." That's supposed to be solid, and I watched it. And I was like, "Yeah, that's solid." And then it's interesting because I thought that um that the sh it could have been a movie. I was talking to Phil. We had Rachel say I just came home from a short road trip. I did too. We went to Rhode Island, so we had a 4-hour trip there and a 4-hour trip back. So we had a lot of things we could talk about, and one was like the Marvel movies, and we're talking about like what happened, where to go, and he mentioned like, oh, it's really interesting that obviously Endgame they were everyone that you know and love ended their stories. Like even Hawkeye, who had the show, but it's like, well, why wasn't that a movie? Maybe Kate
Mm-hmm.
would have even more love if that was a movie because more people would have saw it. And then like Thor is kind of there, kind of not. Obviously, Captain America is not there, so it's just like there's so many of these heroes that left at the same time, so it made it feel like these new characters had such weight, and it's hard to make all new characters seem very exciting. And for me, the thing I haven't loved about the Marvel movies is that nothing feels like there's anything going on. Like they're even within the character arcs, like it just feels like, okay, cool, that was a fun popcorn flick, but what does it actually mean? And again, I don't need it to mean anything for the multiverse. I need it to mean something for the future of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where are these characters going? What's the exciting moment? And they're teased way too much. They breadcrumb way too much.
And you think about where we were with Iron Man. You watch the character journey, even just of Iron Man 3, and you watch the journey that Tony Stark goes through
Sure.
during that film, but it is so excellently set up through Avengers and the follow, like it builds on itself, and it lacks that right now in Marvel. And so this article kind of talks about how there are multiple facets that just are not working well in Marvel. And one of the things that they're talking about is that the timeline and the stress that these teams have to put out these shows and the movies is causing major friction because things can't get done. Scripts are not getting done well. VFX is not getting done well. Someone's blaming someone who's blaming someone else. They were talking about how Miss Marvel has had, or the Marvels, which has apparently had 4 different writers, or was that Blade?
Blade. That was Blade. So Blade still
Yeah,
needs like
Blade has
find
had 4
another
different
writer.
writers.
And then this
4 different
Marvel or
writers.
the Marvels in general, which is really interesting and why I think this movie is going to bomb, and it's sad to see because it's like a female driven
Mm-hmm.
movie. These characters are really cool from the comics and even from the shows. Um, it's really interesting to see that the director has already said, "I hated
Didn't even
working
stick
on this."
around.
Didn't stick
She didn't even
around.
stick around.
Has only said bad things about working on it. So of course people are not going to want to watch this movie. It hardly has a
No.
chance. So it's like no one's getting the pre-sale tickets. Like it's just no matter what, this movie's going to bomb because you said the director's saying they didn't like working on the film. So
Which
what are you
is,
supposed to do?
it's heartbreaking to hear that because can you imagine being just anyone on that film? And once something like that happens, what incentive do you have to continue wanting to make strong movies and strong characters? They said that they released the Marvels, so they've done like apparently weeks upon weeks of reshoots, And usually when Marvel releases films for people to like screeners to get an idea of public feedback, it's like friends and family of Disney employees to kind of get that like, okay, you can't tell anyone sort of a thing. But apparently they held a actual public screening in Texas and the audience gave it what they quote middling reviews. Can you
Yeah.
imagine that they're like, look at all this work we did. We have tried so hard. We're trying to fix it. And the audience was like, eh. I mean,
And there even the promotion of it, like, I don't even know what this movie's about besides the 3 Marvels are meeting. Like, other than that, I'm really not
yeah,
sure what it's about.
I don't know. And you're going to have to explain this to me because I genuinely
Mhm,
don't know. I'm confused about Nick Fury. What's
mhm.
going on with Nick Fury? And
So
why did I hear something about him kissing a lizard?
the issue is I have not watched Secret Evasion because I don't think anyone did. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I just know that, Secret Evasion has to do with the scrolls and aliens, which maybe has to do with the lizard kissing. But these are all connected to the shows too, which makes it very difficult because is everyone watching every show? That's a lot more of an investment than watching one movie a year that Marvel had released. And I love the shows. I think it's great, but honestly, I rather you release shows that have nothing to do with the movies because then I can enjoy those television shows and just feel
Yes.
like I'm just like the Netflix shows. Like it was all its own little thing, and you can watch Iron Fist, but you don't have to watch Iron Fist if you want to enjoy Jessica Jones. And I think that
Well,
was
that's
more
my
successful.
problem. I
Hmm.
don't know where to start. Like, if I want to pick things up right now, I don't know where to go. I can
Sure,
pick up Star Trek anywhere. I can tell anyone to pick up Star Trek anywhere and you'll be fine. But the fact that I don't know where to start. I genuinely would not know where I would start right now. Like, what did I go to Loki? I don't know.
I know
But
Loki sounds like it's a show that, from what I could see, feels like its own little thing. So I guess if you like Loki, go watch Loki. I don't know if it's really connecting to other things.
all I can think about now is that we just talked about Crimson Peak and Tom
Right.
Hiddleston and Crimson Peak. I think Rachel in the chat brings up a good point that there's a reality that it's going to get negative reviews to a
Sure.
certain extent, the Marvels, because it's got women of color in it. It's led by female protagonists and female actresses. The challenge that we run into here is that you're going to get that sort of pessimism and resentment from the people who don't like those kind of characters. But then when you cap that with a poorly written, poorly VFXed, poorly marketed film, it just compounds upon itself. So now,
Like She-Hulk too, because that was just a
exactly,
bad visual effects
bad
and
everything
bad,
that
yeah, exactly.
had such a chance to be like, this is why we tell these stories. Look at this amazing female driven story. And you think about something that you compare it to, say, the original Wonder Woman that
Sure.
came out, and
Everyone
think
really pretty much loved.
everybody loved that, universally loved, but think about how much time Patty Jenkins spent making that film. There was no mandate about DC, well, you got to kind of get it out, 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 out. Now, granted, I think at the time there is something to be said that the DC TV universe was so strong at that point that they didn't need the extra bulk of the movie of Wonder Woman. I think that the DC TV universe was holding its own well enough that even though it wasn't necessarily connected, there was no pressure to get Wonder Woman out super fast. But then they started doing the same thing too, where they're getting things out too fast. And I think that everyone just needs to take a break because
Yeah,
even when
make it
they were
exciting again. Make it
make it exciting
special.
again, make it special, make it unique. And you look at the article, they're talking about how She-Hulk just did not reach the levels that it needed to be because they apparently, let's see, so there were some major issues with the VFX aspect of She-Hulk, but one of the VFX people go back and say, oh no, it was an issue with the writing because apparently a flashback of Tatiana Maslany's transformation into the whole character originally was not written to take place until episode 8, the penultimate
Wow,
episode. But
big
Marvel's
difference.
brain trust watched it and said, oh, then it needs to happen earlier, which means the VFX team had to fix that in post. And everybody
Right.
jokes, hey, we'll fix it in post. There's only so much you can do to fix it in post, and you need the time to fix it. The article tells me something that first off, I knew not to watch Quantumania. Everybody said Quantumania, Ant-Man Quantumania was just a disaster. Don't
Oh,
watch it, don't see it.
I would
Was
say
it? Do you
Ant-Man. No,
disagree?
no, it's definitely not good. But I think Doctor Strange is more of a disaster than Ant-Man for me. Ant-Man,
Really?
what's yeah, because Ant-Man for me, I think is just an okay movie. It's not. It's just fine. It's just there. Like there's nothing that offends me. Doctor Strange kind of almost offends me, and I think to a worse extent, Thor: Love and Thunder really offends me as a Jane Foster fan. I hated that movie. I absolutely hated Jane Foster.
You know what? I think that I've been getting the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and the
Ant-Man.
No Way Home. No, No Way Home stuck in
Oh,
my head. I think I've been
okay.
putting those two together. No Way Home, love it. Doctor Strange, take me out of it. Da 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 da. Mr. Steven. Okay, that's that one. The other one with Wanda. Okay, now I'm remembering. This is how long it's been since I've watched this. That was the thing with.
It was like Wanda. It
Okay.
was like more of a horror movie. It was more of like Wanda was evil. That was that movie, and
And
then
that was the one where we were getting frustrated with her lack of a redemption arc. We're like, why did we take all the
exactly.
character development that she did here and then we just
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
now I
why
remember. All right.
some people like Doctor Strange though. Some people it was a torn movie. There was like some people really liked it, some people didn't. I hated it. Ant-Man,
I got it.
I don't think it's a horrible movie. I just don't think it's a good
Mhm.
movie. Like we all thought it was gonna be because again it was gonna introduce Kang and everything. We'll talk about that. But also I
Mhm.
did forget to mention one of I think the best Marvel movies to come out, Black Panther Wakanda Forever was so good. And obviously had black leads, had a female black lead, and it was such a wonderful movie. But you could tell they put time into it. They put effort into it. It was very thoughtful. And also it didn't it was, one beautiful thing about Black Panther, it's kind of connected to the Marvel universe, but
Mhm.
feels very much like its own thing. It feels like its own world, feels like its own story, and I think that works very well with Black Panther. That's one of my favorites.
I think that works well in general with Marvel. When they choose to tell their own stories, it succeeds. I think that we're overwhelmed. People are overwhelmed by having to try to keep up with things. I I get overwhelmed with that. I have so much going on. I can't go back and watch 4 shows and a movie before I can
Sure.
watch the Marvels to know what's going on. And it's strange because I think to an extent as someone who is in the universe, you want that. You don't want to go into the Marvels and have the same, oh, for an hour we spent time telling everybody what everybody who's watched the stuff has already seen. I think it's just a risk that they take, and it's a risk that I think that they need to start spreading the love with. They need to have the line where they are following the stories that everybody knows and that everybody's keeping up with, but then they need to have enough standalones to make it accessible, because I think that's what's happening is they're losing the accessibility with their audience.
And also, again,
And
the excitement, like what is getting us excited? What are we building towards too? Because I think you could say the solo stuff, but then like all we want is a Young Avengers thing, and you're not giving us Young Avengers. Like what's taking you so long?
and you have to, if you're not going to have the story, you need to have the wow factor. And
Sure.
it sounds like the effects just haven't been there. The VFX has not been there. There haven't been any amazing, oh wow, that was an amazing special effect. And it
Or
looks
just a
like
story.
or story. It looks like that the overwhelming um strain and stress on the VFX team literally caused them to unionize. And at the same time, on top of that, then you had the major writers' strike. And so Marvel has been sitting with nothing to write for the last few months. And I think as someone who is part of a union, um, I am proud that people are finally getting the opportunity to stand up and say, this is what we deserve. We do not need to be working 14-hour days to make your deadline that you made unreasonable. But it has caused the MCU to just sort of collapse and invert on itself a little bit. And I think that that's on the CEOs.
But also it's a Disney problem, right? Because it's not
Yes.
just Disney. If it was just Marvel, sure, it's not Disney's fault. But
I always forget about
Disney,
that aspect.
yeah, Disney's had such issues in the last couple of years. They changed CEOs. They went back to their old one because the last one was not great. I'm not saying this one's great either, but yeah, there's a lot of damage that's been done, and there's been a lot of bombs for Disney. And I don't remember the last time it's been this bad. Like,
Mm.
and again, there's so many interesting caveats because there's some of these movies that are actually doing okay post theater. So, like, Encanto, I remember when that came out, in the theaters, it didn't do well. Like, I didn't even go see it in
Well,
theaters, and then it did really well on Disney Plus, Encanto.
and I think Encanto was on the tail end of COVID scares. So
It
Encanto had didn't
was at the very end, yes, but then also Elemental is a very recent example of a movie that actually
mm-hmm,
did pretty well on streaming and then did very bad, very, very, very bad in theaters.
mm-hmm.
So Disney
I think
people are just Disney Plus waiting a lot, and Wish again that's coming up now, and you're like, ooh, this is their new Disney princess. Is this gonna do well?
so. You talk about damage, and if we're talking, okay, well, the FX, they better be good, but they're not. The writing, it better be good. It really isn't. Okay, if you don't have those, you better have star power. And then this whole catastrophe has happened with Jonathan Majors.
Sure.
Now, I am not familiar, I'm not caught up enough to understand who Kang is. So, can you give me just a little Cliff Notes version of who Kang is? And then we'll
Right.
dig into what's happened with that
He's
actor.
he's a Fantastic Four villain. He's a big Fantastic Four villain. He's kind of like in the vein of Thanos, where he's like a galactic villain. He wants to destroy the world type thing, and he was going to be the new Thanos. And because they do have actually big things coming up, Fantastic Four, X-Men, that they don't for some reason want to tease and do anything with. They tease it very little in Doctor Strange, obviously, but that was Elseworld stuff. They haven't done anything with it, but Kang is kind of like the build up to at least to the Fantastic Four.
Uh huh.
Jonathan Majors, as an actor, he got into kind of as not the same as Ezra Miller, but in the idea that something happened in
Yeah.
his public life that allegedly he harmed his girlfriend, and he is now going to court for it. And that's what's going on, is that he kind of did that, and now their biggest star uh, probably cannot be in these movies for a right reason. So that is what's going on with Jonathan Majors right now. And he was a big star even before the King stuff. He was in Creed. He was kind of having this build up to being a bigger star. So this was gonna be their big name at this point.
I think what I would like to point out about this is that at least Marvel is doing the right thing about this,
Sure, yeah. It
because the
wasn't the
Ezra Miller
Ezra thing.
situation really bothered me. I had a hard time wanting to support that film in any capacity because of this. And this is, it's so wild when you, especially recently, when you get a chance to hear about how affected the people you don't even think about can be from something like a strike or something like a movie bombing, or I think every level of production, to think about a whole series of things that we're expecting from Marvel now destroyed because of one man is so frustrating for the
They could really
storytellers who
recast him.
really that yes, and they talk about that in the article. Did you see that bit where
I
they
also want to mention, New Rachel said that
yeah.
Sterling K. Brown would be an interesting choice for Kang. That would be very
Ooh, I
interesting.
would love ooh, I would really like that. I'm here for that. As the Gen Zers would say, slay. I side note, tangent. I learned so much about Gen Z stuff. I don't actually
Recently,
know that much about, because when I did Sleepy Hollow, when I did my show, we had kids, like we had 10 to 16-year-olds, and they are
I
Gen
don't think
Z.
they're Gen Z anymore. I don't know where it ends,
Are they
but
not?
I don't. Let me see. I don't. Let me see where Gen Z ends. I know there's a
Then it's
new.
whatever's next. They say sus.
Yeah, no, that's definitely. I'm. It's interesting that you're learning that now.
I think
Um,
no, yes, I am learning that, cuz kids, when I did tours, kids were not allowed to talk like that. They needed to speak in full sentences on my tours, and if they didn't, I was the kind of person to be like, that's totally sus, and I'd be like,
oh, they
"You
are
want to try
still
that
Gen
again?"
Z. So currently
Yeah, they're
9 to 24 is Gen Z right now.
like you are to millennial. They're late Gen
Hmm.
Z.
Yeah.
Um, but I've learned so much. We kept Dennis and I, who was my Ichabod, and we're about the same age. We're right around 30. We had a lot of fun tapping into it, being like, oh yeah, what do you young whippersnappers say these days? Teach us about your things. Teach us what's sus. Yeah, teach us sus. Slay. All right, cool. Like, we just had fun not really actually caring, but just pretending we cared. I don't know how we got on this topic, but
I
Gen Z
think
kids.
you tried using Gen Z slang.
Oh
That's
yeah,
where
soup
it went.
sus, yo. I don't think they say yo either.
No, I think
Uh,
that's more of a millennial millennial thing.
but regardless, I am glad that Marvel decided to make this a big deal and to allow it to be a big deal and to not shy away from it. They're like, well, we are basically screwed. We are genuinely, pardon my French, fucked, but we need to figure something out because we're not going to have this man represent our work and our art, and he cannot be someone who represents this.
Sure.
Um, so I do appreciate that they did that the right way. I think recasting is a great idea.
Abby also is in the chat saying just dropped in. Have no idea what you're talking about, but hey.
See, if you all were a patron, you could you could drop in for no reason and have no idea what we're talking about. You
And
also
just
get
jump
the
in.
episodes early because even if you can't join us live, we may not post this right away. So who knows? You might get it a week early. It's soup's fun.
For sure. It's
It's
interesting.
fetch.
That's more of the millennial. Although I think Gen Z does still like using Mean Girls language, is from what I can understand. So
I don't
one
think Mean Girls ever goes out of style. Did you
no,
see the Mean Girls Walmart commercial?
I saw of it, but I didn't actually watch the commercial.
It's actually pretty good. Maybe we should do that for a patron episode. That's just hilarious. Anywho, I think that my question for you is, do you think a pause, a break, or a simple halt in content would give audience members enough time to breathe that Marvel could start up again? Or do you think that they need to keep what they're doing? They just need to somehow find a way to do it better.
I do want to also mention New Rachel's comment, then I will answer your question. But they said, did you know there's a new Mean Girls movie coming out in January? It's a musical
No.
adaptation. I did know that because my friend
Oh,
Julius is actually was an extra in it. So, um,
so is it a video? Is it a movie of the musical? Because there is a
yeah,
musical.
it's a movie
Oh,
of
the
the
musical's
musical. So
great.
Renee Rapp, who I've
Cool.
talked about with you, she was a Broadway star before all this, and she played Regina in the actual Broadway show,
Haha, that's
and
awesome.
she's now gonna be in the movie. So that's pretty cool. Anyways, to answer your question about a break, no, because I think that loses excitement. I think it is just to slow things down. Because like I think if you take a break and there's no content for 2 years, like then who cares about Marvel? But if you may slow things down, but also make good content, that's probably your sweet spot.
For me, I wonder if a break is necessary. I don't think you need to, like, I don't know if you need to stop creating content, but part of me wonders, like, slow it down, but drastically. I mean, talking to the point where it sounds like Disney's mandate is you can never have a moment with no new Marvel
No,
content.
you should definitely have moments without new Marvel content. I would say go back to your old days where you have one TV show
Mm-hmm.
maybe airing and then have like two movies that come out a year.
I think part of me wonders if suspense can build the audience if we take a break, like say for literally 6 months there's nothing. I mean,
Sure.
think about how big it used to be at Comic-Con. And while I was doing some research today before we were going to do this podcast, I came across some clips at Comic-Con where they're announcing all the stuff that they're doing. And I remember being in Hall H when people were just losing it. I mean, the sound and the shouting was so overwhelming, you couldn't even hear the speaker. And it was a little bit like this time it was just, yeah, okay, cool, great,
Because
whatever.
they're not coming on any because they're also just not doing anything exciting. Like I remember,
Mm-hmm.
I would say the last time people screamed in Hall H was probably when Natalie Portman returned as Jane Foster. That was probably the last
Yeah.
time where we got to see that. It's like, whoa, A, I didn't expect it, and B, it's like, oh, she's returning. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Again, then you get to see what they actually did. But yeah, I think that's something they just got to build excitement again. I think they and to do because if you totally stop I do think you're forgotten a little bit, especially with DC. Like if DC really hits it out of the ballpark with the Superman movie and all that, it's like, oh well, now DC's better. If you
Yeah,
know,
but when was the last time DC gave us something really strong?
yeah, good question. I mean, I think
But
everyone's gonna have a different answer to that because some people really love Aquaman and some people really love whatever, but
I
hard to
guess.
answer.
But it feels like it's been a hot sec since those things came out. So
Yeah.
has it? I don't, my thought is I think in this case less is more. There is there's two other things that this article brings up which might be an option to help kind of recalibrate the Marvel universe. One of them is to bring back the OG Avengers, and this is apparently it is a conversation including um Black Widow and Tony Stark.
See,
So
that's
literally
almost
Robert Downey
boring to
Jr. and
me.
Scarlett Johansson. Me too. I don't like
Yeah,
that plan. And I think it's
I've
something
seen
we've
that.
talked about before. I know, I don't like it. We've talked about before how on DC, one of the things that started frustrating us was all the characters who died came back. Where's the
Sure.
stakes? What makes sacrifice worth it? If every single person that you kill off can come back, why would I want to go and be prepared to be shocked? Every time someone dies, I'd be like, they'll come back. No big deal. I think those two characters need to stay dead. I think that
Abby
that's a
said
necessity.
Abby says I've definitely slowed down on Marvel. Haven't cared much about what they've been doing. Haven't stayed up on releases, which is sad. Because I think they're exploring more interesting characters now. They are just not well. I
Yeah.
think that's
Just
what's really sad. Yeah, no,
that is
again,
what's sad.
Kamala is such a fruitful character. She it's interesting because she is a character. She's a newer character that a lot of people like, which is hard. Like when you come up with a new character in comics, where it's like overnight sensation, and she was in the comics.
Give me a rundown real fast
hmm
of her
For
character.
like Miss Marvel. Kamala came out probably like 10 years ago. What's interesting about her is that Miss Marvel's the character name, the superhero name comes from Carol. She was Miss Marvel before Captain Marvel. But she was Captain Marvel for like 10 years and the Miss Marvel title wasn't being used, right? And then Kamala in this version was an Inhuman. And Marvel was trying to do stuff with Inhumans because they didn't have the X-Men rights for the movies. They're like,
Huh.
let's try making Inhumans popular. And Kamala just was a character that showed up, and she was a Muslim American who was very Spider-Man-esque, where she was a normal girl, just like going to high school, had friends, had problems, but also so happened to have these kind of stretchy powers because she was an Inhuman. And the whole comic was really just kind of balancing act of her being this really nerdy girl and also being a superhero and hanging out with like her idols like Captain Marvel and the Avengers and ended up becoming an Avenger. But now, as the show is going on, they killed her off for like 5 days, and I'm not joking. It was like a month because they wanted to make her a mutant because the X-Men is becoming a movie franchise. So now in the
Yes.
comics, she's a mutant and they are not doing great things with her in the comics right now. But that's because of the movies. They're like, we gotta follow the movies. So it's so
Yeah.
crazy that the comic was so great. So many people loved it because it was just so like, let's just see what this girl is doing. And she was connected to the Marvel universe, but wasn't. She made her own adventures. She had her own problems, but sometimes she fought with Iron Man, and that's what it should be. And now they're making her way too connected to everything else, and that's not as fun.
So you bring up another kind of part two of the quote fix it of Marvel is
Sure.
bringing back in X-Men and Fantastic Four, Deadpool, things like that, and bringing those
Mhm.
in. Do you see success in that? I personally have always loved the X-Men. I think X-Men is a great franchise. Probably one of the first ever superhero movies I just I there's so much about X-Men that grabbed me as a kid that I do want to see that back, and I hope that things go well for them. But is there concern that you might have that they're just not going to do it right? That it's going to fall down the same path as all this stuff?
No, I really don't, because I think that's why they're waiting so long because they're trying
Mm,
to get it right. And the X-Men, there's just so much you can do with it. I feel like it's I don't want to say it's hard to mess up, but I don't. I think there's what's interesting is I'm curious to see if are they going to do the X-Men or are they going to do X-Men characters? Is it going to be like are we going to get is it going to be like an Avengers where we get to see them kind of
that's
they
fair.
should do this. They probably should. Where you get to see a little bit from each character and then get to see the X-Men.
Yeah.
But I think it's gonna be hard to, and also Fantastic Four, it's gonna be hard to mess up because the last Fantastic Four movie was just so horrendous. How can you be worse than that? So, no, I think this is their saving grace, honestly, and I hope they do it right. But yeah, just go to basics. Just do your thing with it, and you should be fine.
Was Multiverse of Madness the movie that had the Haley Atwell Carter and
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
Patrick
yeah.
Stewart show?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I'm remembering this more and more, and remembering that I liked it less and less.
it's
Abby
not
in the
great.
chat says, "I adore the X-Men. If they do X-Men movies and do them well, I will still be excited for Marvel projects. And please, just more Wolverine."
I
You
think
know what?
that's where you're gonna get more of the fans, is if you
Hmm.
I mean, Fantastic Four is not gonna matter as much, but I think
No.
X-Men's, obviously gonna matter a lot.
And you know what I think is going to help is that X-Men has been so disconnected for so long
Mhm.
that it is like infusing fresh blood. It's like you can listen to the same radio station over and over and over and over again, and suddenly you get another channel and you're like, "Oh, it's still pop, it's still country or whatever, but it's fresh and they got new songs and they have a different DJ." And I think just that infusion of something new is going to do a lot of good. Even though it, like something old, something new at the same time, I think that that's going to do a lot of good for DC for Marvel.
For definitely for Marvel and maybe for DC too. But then
Yeah.
that is the question, the big theme of this episode is the golden age of superheroes over. Yeah, I think it is because we are, how many
Hmm.
years has superheroes been around, or at least in media for movies? It's been a long time, in the mainstream. So yes, the golden age is over, but that doesn't mean you can't have a modern age and you can't have a new age of superheroes. Just like anything else, everything ebbs and flows. Like think about, I don't know, Top
The
Gun,
best
a
the
movie that
best
came
example
out.
I think,
Mm,
well, right now is Star Trek. Like Star
sure.
Trek had nothing for years. Tried to reboot it with Discovery, didn't really succeed until the later seasons. Tried to reboot it with a couple things, and then just in the last 2 or 3 years, with the success of the final season of Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, all of a sudden they're like, boom, 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 we got it. But it is like, as you say, it's more like a modern age of Star Trek. It's not the golden age. It's not the original Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, all that stuff. It is a different world, but you can still tap into it. But that was a 20-year gap since they had really good regularly released content that wasn't just kind of sort of some subpar films that were not great. I learned
Star
Tom
Wars, I think
Hardy was
is
no one great to work with.
Star Wars, I think is a good example too. I mean, you
Yeah.
got a lot of ebbs and flows there. Some, movies and franchise people got really excited for, and then they gave too much. You're like, wait, okay, I don't want more Star Wars now. So yeah, point being, sure, the golden age is over. And it lasted a long time, which is great. That doesn't mean superheroes are over. We're always going to have superheroes because we always
Yes.
have. But they're going to look different, and Marvel and DC and anyone else trying to do superheroes is going to have to reinvent themselves. And I mean, there's a big conversation in comics about that too. Maybe that's a whole nother podcast of like, okay, how do you revitalize comics? Because both
Hmm.
Marvel and DC at this point in comics are not pulling their weight, and you're seeing a lot of independent comics getting better and bigger and doing more things. And you can see that with maybe superheroes too, because Invincible is still a very popular show, and that's an independent superhero. And I just had a ball drop from one of my things. Just fell on the ground randomly. Anyways,
Ghosts.
ghosts are following me. But Walking Dead's a great example.
Yeah.
There's other shows based on comics that are all
Hmm.
independent, or even independent. The Boys, great freaking
The
example.
Boys.
That's in
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah,
one.
people are loving superheroes in a different way. So yeah, I think it's just about reinvention, and it's really about putting your best foot forward. And hopefully, Marvel and DC. It looks like DC, at least, they obviously have a very new direction they're going in. I think Marvel
Yeah.
is going to have to do the same thing. They're going to have to go in a new direction and stop feeling like they're the best shit ever, and actually get over at that and just be like, how do we reinvent ourselves? That's the only way we're going to do better.
And I think at this point, for me, if I was like, hey guys, I could tell you one piece of advice as a person who really is not qualified to give you this advice, I'd tell you to take a break. I'd tell you that at this point you need to pause for a little bit, whether it's a couple of months, whether it's really limited amount of content, but you cannot put something out until it's ready. And you need to give your audience credit that they would rather wait for something that's worthwhile than have to watch something that was subpar.
See,
I
I
think
think
they
they
have
need
enough
quick money
audience.
though. They need quick money. That's why they're doing it. It's not even about
I
like,
guess. Yep.
right? Because if you
That's a
don't
good
have that
perspective.
many releases, then where's the money funneling in? And but if you have a lot of subpar releases, that's at least some money
Some
funneling
money.
in. Yeah,
But you look, apparently, Miss Marvel was, or the Marvels was a shit ton to make and
sure,
really did poorly. So I think
sure.
at this
Or
point they're
going to.
gambling and they're failing pretty impressively. But those are my thoughts. Do you have anything else that you want to share about this article or about the state of the Marvel universe in general?
No, I mean, I think I kinda, said it all. I'm excited to see where it goes in the future. I think Deadpool is honestly gonna be a
Yeah,
really, really big
yeah,
movie to kinda see where things are gonna go because people love that franchise, and if that fails, that's a really, we'll see. I don't think it will because of how
yeah.
many
I don't
people
think
are
so either.
involved and what they're actually doing with that movie. There's a lot of exciting things, and it's gonna be interesting. Are they gonna play with nostalgia more? Because the last movie that did really well for them is Spider-Man because of the nostalgic
Mm-hmm.
aspects, and Deadpool probably because of the nostalgic aspects. So is that something they do even more of? I don't know, but yeah, we'll see. I will be following the movies. I can't promise I'll be following every show, but I will at least still be following the movies to see where it goes.
I'm gonna wait until you tell me which ones to watch.
Sure,
And
yeah.
I honestly think that the only thing that's gonna get me really back into Marvels is, like, Loki should have. The fact that I have
Mm,
not yet watched Loki should say something. But I think it'll be X-Men. For me, X-Men is something it's a group of characters that I'm very passionate about. I love the stories of X-Men. So I think that's gonna be what maybe steps me back into the universe. And again, I think it's because it's so far separated that I don't need to go catch up on all the other stuff. I know X-Men. I can just hop right on in close enough to find that new path, step on in and be okay with it.
sure. No, we'll see what ends up happening with it all. But if you guys like
Yep.
more of these topics, let us know. Maybe some of these more of these movies and shows are coming out, and we could do bigger topics about this. But it's been a while since we did the state of one of these.
The
We did the
MCU. We
state of
did the State of the DC.
DC twice, and it did really well with
Yeah.
our audience. So hopefully you like the Marvel ones just as well. And obviously, when we get more information about DC, I'm sure we'll because they're gearing up to their new
Hmm.
stuff. We'll talk more about that.
And you can email us, thelegendaryladies@gmail.com. Find us at Twitter, on X, whatever we're called now. Legends_podcast. The place you want to be is Instagram at The Legendary Ladies, TikTok, The Legendary Ladies, Patreon /The Legendary Ladies.
Just
We've got some
everywhere.
cool stuff just everywhere. We've got some cool stuff planned. Email us, send us your thoughts, join the Patreon. Even if you join at the $2 level, you're going to get access to Patreon's rolling out some new features like chats, and we're discussing integrating that into our patron levels. So we would like to hear from you. We'd like to chat with all of our listeners. We really appreciate the emails that we get a chance to share. So send us your thoughts. If you think we're way off base, if you think that Marvel needs to be just churning stuff out, if you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, Quantumania was amazing, defend it. Cite your sources. I love hearing that kind of stuff. So tell me why you think we're wrong. But also send us an email if you think we're right. We love getting suggestions. Our last episode, we did the pilot of ER. I
I've
will tell
heard.
you,
Yeah.
this was not even a week ago, you guys. I am now 2.5 seasons in.
That's
Oh
crazy.
no,
I
wait.
think
So
you're gonna
I
watch it
guess in the
all.
middle of season 2. Oh yeah. Maybe. There's a character named Abby and Luca. Once Abby and Luca show up, and then Lucy comes and Lucy goes. There are characters that I'm looking forward
Mm,
to seeing. Um, but you know, it's funny. I could see how people who are not like me, it's overwhelming. Binging this show is actually hard because it's so fast and it's so loud that I can handle it. I don't think ER is an innately bingeable show. I think
right.
like this, it's almost too stressful. Me, I'm like, yeah, let's just keep going. This is what I do for a living.
It's
But
not
I think for
relaxing.
everybody else, it's really not relaxing. And Fiona was right. Episode 19, even by today's standards, that's not saying that back then was different, but like today's standards of cinematography and physical storytelling is mind-blowingly spectacular. It is it's a shockingly jarring episode, and I encourage everybody to watch it. Like, it's that good. But yeah, so I think that's gonna wrap up our conversation. Kat, you want to close us out?
Yeah. So, Amy, I'm gonna pass the baton. What's coming up for you if there's anything?
I'm on break right now. Sleepy Hollow just finished. We just had our major conservation gala with Global Conservation Force yesterday. We premiered our new documentary, Holding the Front Line, about rangers in the Eastern Cape of South Africa who are actively on the front line protecting rhinoceros and cheetahs from poachers. So if anyone is interested, you can follow at Global Conservation Force on Instagram and find us online, globalconservationforce.com. The documentary is making the film festival circuits, so it's not available for public release yet. It will be sometime within the next 6 months to a year. We're very proud of the film, and we're honored to be able to show it to our donors yesterday. So please follow if you're into wildlife conservation. If you would like to learn more, globalconservationforce.org.
Awesome. Well, we have two Kickstarters going on because we're crazy.
Of course
That
you do.
I know, right? We have our comic Kickstarter, which is Slice Life and Anime Adventure. So if you're looking for a very clean one shot, just an anime spectacular, go check that out. And so it's based on our webtoon Slice Life, which is gay, but this one is more of a parody of like Pokemon, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, Power Rangers. So it's a lot of fun. And then we also have enamel pins, werewolves, the apple from Snow White, the poison apple. We have superhero pins and then also ghost pins as well. So we launched that today and excited about that as well. But that's it. Believe it or not, that's
Only
it.
two Kickstarters, she says.
Only two Kickstarters. That one we launched today after a 5-hour road trip from a Comic Con. But yeah, that's it for us. We'll be back next week, and hopefully, you guys enjoyed and stay legendary.